Welcome to another podcast of the Riffle series. The Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves. Imagine going to a website and immediately getting slammed with a stark white attention-required block page from Cloudflare. You know, that page that just says you do not have the right permissions to enter.
Oh, yeah. It's like a digital bouncer just stopping you right at the door.
Exactly. Well, today we are looking at the exact financial equivalent of that firewall. Our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack how a major global financial hub regulates the intersection of ancient religious principles and, well, cutting-edge finance.
Right, which is an incredibly complex thing to systemize, when you really think about it.
It totally is. So we're looking at the Dubai Financial Services Authority, the DFSA. Specifically, we are breaking down their Consultation Paper 172, which was issued in May 2026, alongside some very specific appendices detailing amendments to their Islamic Finance Rules, their Conduct of Business modules, and their glossary.
Yeah, and it really acts as a blueprint for how a modern financial system builds a firewall. It's deciding who gets to operate within its walls and who just gets blocked.
And I actually experienced that firewall literally when I was trying to pull these documents for the deep dive. I went to the DFSA website to grab the consultation paper, and Cloudflare just stopped me cold.
Wait, really? While you were just trying to get the public paper?
Yep. The screen literally said, "Sorry, you have been blocked. The action you just performed triggered the security solution." It even gave me the receipts. I wrote it down. My specific Cloudflare Ray ID was 9FE660B664BDF1101, and it showed my exact IP, 66.102.6.228.
Oh, wow. You actually kept the exact Ray ID. That's hilarious.
I had to. I was staring at the screen realizing that, access is never guaranteed. You really have to prove you are authorized. And that factual trigger of a security solution is honestly the perfect analogy for today's sources.
Because just as a server requires specific verifiable behaviors to grant access, the DFSA requires specific endorsements for firms to even access and operate in the Islamic financial market.
Exactly. And moving from the idea of gaining access to the entity that actually controls that access, we have the DFSA.
Right, and they regulate the Dubai International Financial Center, the DIFC. We are looking closely at Dubai today because the consultation paper points out this genuinely staggering statistic. As of 2024, the UAE ranked 4th globally in Islamic financial markets by assets.
4th globally. That is just a massive volume of capital flowing through a single jurisdiction.
It is. And the DIFC is a critical hub for these huge global issuances, like US dollar ESG sukuks. This is where huge volumes of global capital flow. So understanding this rulebook is absolutely essential for any savvy learner or investor out there.
Yeah, let's pause here for a second, though, because if you are listening to this and you mostly deal in conventional Western finance, the actual mechanics of a sukuk might seem kind of opaque.
That's a fair point. A lot of people just assume it's an Islamic bond, but it's really not that simple.
Right, because in conventional finance, if a company wants to raise money, they issue a bond. It's essentially an IOU. You lend them $100, they pay you back with interest.
But Islamic finance strictly forbids riba, which is the earning or paying of interest. Therefore, a sukuk cannot just be an IOU. Instead, it is an asset-backed instrument.
So you aren't just lending money, you're buying into something real.
Exactly. When you buy a sukuk, you are buying partial ownership in a tangible asset. So if a government issues a sukuk to build, say, a toll road, your return isn't an interest payment. It is an actual share of the toll revenues generated by that specific road.
And then when you layer ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria on top of that, you suddenly have these green sukuks funding renewable energy projects.
Right, which is huge right now. You have Western institutional capital that is super hungry for green investments, and it's meeting Middle Eastern asset structuring.
Exactly. And this is why Dubai's rulebook matters to you, whether you are in New York, London, or Singapore. It is literally a blueprint that other global financial hubs might be forced to copy as these markets merge.
Oh, absolutely. They are setting the standard.
Okay, let's unpack this because there is a crucial distinction in the sources about how the DFSA actually views its own job when policing these products. The documents explicitly state that the DFSA acts as a Shari'a systems regulator, not a Shari'a regulator.
And I love this part because that shift in language completely changes their entire regulatory mandate. They are not acting as theological scholars determining the divine validity of a financial product.
Right. Think about it like a restaurant health inspector versus a food critic.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, so a food critic, which would be a true Shari'a regulator, would taste the biryani and declare, this recipe isn't authentically Islamic, the spices are wrong. But the DFSA is playing the role of the health inspector.
Right, they do not taste the food to judge its authenticity at all. They are just checking if the kitchen has the right systems in place. Like, are the refrigerators functioning? Is there a documented process for handling the ingredients?
Exactly. So translating that back to the financial kitchen, how does that work?
Well, Article 13.1 of the law regulating Islamic financial business, the IFB law, mandates the appointment of a Shari'a supervisory board, or an SSB.
So every firm doing this needs their own board of scholars.
Yes. The DFSA requires the firm to appoint this board, to establish systems, to actually disseminate the board's rulings to the staff, and to conduct regular Shari'a reviews and internal audits.
So they're literally just auditing the systems, not the religion itself.
Precisely. The regulator provides clear, enforceable metrics. Did you hold the audit? Did the board actually sign off on the product? This allows a secular financial authority to assess performance and ensure compliance without overstepping into theological interpretation. It's a fascinating regulatory feat.
It really is. And this brings us to sort of a conceptual fork in the road. If gaining access to this market requires installing these strict internal systems, who exactly is required to install them?
Right, like who actually has to let the health inspector into their kitchen?
Exactly. And this leads directly to the core of Consultation Paper 172. The DFSA is clarifying the definition of holding out.
Yeah, holding out refers to how a firm presents itself to the broader market. Article 9 of the IFB law dictates that a business cannot operate an Islamic financial institution or even run an Islamic window within a conventional bank without a specific endorsement on its regulatory license.
And the consultation paper outlines exactly what trips that wire. You are holding out if you market your operations or your financial services using terms like halal, Shari'a compliant, or Islamic.
It also triggers if you publicly claim that your business is conducted in accordance with directions given by an SSB. Essentially, if you use the label to attract Islamic capital, you must have the endorsement and the costly systems to back it up.
Makes sense. The intention is clearly to prevent marketing deception, right? Like a firm cannot casually brand a product as Shari'a compliant just to capture a demographic without submitting to the regulatory framework that actually verifies that claim.
Exactly. You can't just slap a sticker on it and call it a day.
But I want to push back on that framework for a second because this raises a very practical hypothetical for me. What if a generic, conventional brokerage simply executes a client's request to buy an Islamic bond?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Think about a supermarket. If a vegan consumer goes into a conventional supermarket and buys an apple, the supermarket is just distributing a product. They don't suddenly need a vegan certification board to sell that apple.
That's a really good analogy.
Right. So does a conventional broker providing access to a sukuk suddenly need to hire a Shari'a supervisory board?
No, and the DFSA addresses that exact nuance with what they call an execution-only exemption. The paper explicitly states that simply providing access to or distributing an Islamic product without offering advice or making representations about its Shari'a compliance does not trigger the need for an Islamic endorsement.
Oh, okay. So the conventional broker executing a client's explicit order for a sukuk is totally clear of the requirement.
They are. But hold on, even if they bypass the Shari'a board requirement, they can't just operate in the Wild West.
Right, because the general conduct of business rules like COB Rule 3.4.2 and GEN Rule 3.5.1 still apply to that broker, correct? They still have an obligation not to mislead the client.
Exactly. The overarching regulatory net always applies. The general rules mandate that any financial promotion must be clear, fair, and not misleading.
So you can't just lie about what you're selling.
Right. And furthermore, the firm still bears the responsibility of assessing the suitability of the product for that specific client, based on their financial situation and objectives. The execution-only exemption removes the requirement for specialized Islamic compliance systems, but it definitely does not remove fundamental fiduciary duties.
That makes total sense. So we have established who needs the endorsement based on how they market themselves. Now we need to look at what they're actually selling.
And this is where the DFSA's philosophy really shines. They take a very strict substance over form approach.
Yes, they look past the marketing label to the actual mechanics of the financial instrument. And here is where it gets really interesting, because some of these products fundamentally alter the relationship between buyer and seller. Like, let's look at PSIAs.
Profit-sharing investment accounts. From a conventional standpoint, you might look at a PSIA and just assume it functions like a mutual fund or a collective investment fund, right?
Yeah, where multiple people pool their money into an account managed by a firm to generate a return.
But mechanically, it is completely different. The consultation paper highlights that PSIAs are often structured under a concept called mudaraba. And we really need to break down how mudaraba actually works in practice because it shifts the entire risk profile.
Let's do it. What is mudaraba?
Well, mudaraba is a specific type of partnership. One party, the investor, provides all the capital. They are called the Rab al-Mal. The other party, the financial institution, provides the entrepreneurial expertise and management. They are the mudarab.
Okay, so the investor puts up the money and the bank does the trading. But what happens if the investment tanks? Because in a typical mutual fund, the fund manager still collects their management fee regardless of performance, and the losses are just absorbed by the net asset value.
Right. But under a strict mudaraba contract, the economic substance of risk is totally asymmetrical. The investor bears the entire financial loss.
Wow, the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
The financial institution loses their time and effort, but they do not share in the financial capital loss, nor are they obligated to guarantee the principal.
Because guaranteeing a return on capital without risk would be akin to interest, or riba.
Precisely. And that is exactly why the DFSA classifies managing a PSIA as a distinct financial service. It does not fall under the standard disclosure rules of a mutual fund, where risk is somewhat structurally smoothed out.
It gets its own tailored regulatory regime, right, under IFR Chapter 5.
Yes. The regulator recognizes that if a retail client is bearing 100% of the capital risk, the disclosures regarding how the mudarib manages that money must be exceptionally rigorous.
And the DFSA is actually applying this strict substance over form logic far beyond traditional accounts. I mean, the rules are stretching to cover Web3 and decentralized finance too. Crypto tokens are covered in these sources.
Yeah, they are. The guidance specifies that crypto tokens acting as a medium of exchange or held for payment or investment purposes fall firmly under this regulatory umbrella.
It is such a fascinating collision. You have the ancient text-based principles of Islamic finance meeting the immutable, coded environment of blockchain technology. The rules state that if a firm refers to a token using terms like Islamic digital token or Islamic digital asset, they are officially holding it out as Shari'a compliant.
And the scope of regulation extends to the infrastructure as well. Consider an MTF, a multilateral trading facility.
Right, which in plain English is basically a digital matchmaking engine for buyers and sellers. Essentially, a mini stock exchange operated by an investment firm rather than a centralized national body.
Exactly. So if a firm is operating an MTF and that digital order book lists these Islamic digital tokens, the operator falls under the regulatory regime.
So the system must apply regardless of the medium.
Exactly. Whether the asset is a physical property backing a sukuk, or literally a string of code on a distributed ledger traded on an MTF, if the Shari'a label is applied, the compliance systems must be in place.
That's incredible. Okay, so we have looked at investments where an individual takes the risk, like mudaraba. Let's pivot to products where a community pools their risk. The consultation paper outlines a massive regulatory shift for one specific product, Takaful.
Oh, Takaful is brilliant. It represents a fundamental redesign of conventional insurance.
Yeah, the new glossary module defines Takaful as an insurance contract, but the mechanics are entirely different from paying a premium to a massive corporation like, say, Geico or Allstate.
Right, because in conventional insurance, the corporation assumes the risk. If you don't crash your car, the corporation just keeps your premium as profit.
But Takaful flips that entirely. It is a mutual protection pool. The parties agree to jointly support one another against specific losses by donating to a shared fund.
Now, the Takaful operator, the insurance company, does not actually own the fund. Their role is confined to managing the administrative activities and investing the pooled assets in a Sharia-compliant manner. They usually just take a flat fee or a performance cut for their management services.
And this brings us to the structural shift in Consultation Paper 172. The DFSA is proposing moving the disclosure rules for Takaful out of the niche Islamic Finance Rules, specifically IFR Chapter 8, and dropping them directly into the General Conduct of Business Module, COB Section 7.7.4.
Which is a huge deal. Moving rules from a specialized module to a general module indicates a major shift in regulatory philosophy. They are prioritizing universal consumer protection, particularly for the retail client.
Because when selling a product structured around communal risk, absolute transparency is non-negotiable.
Totally. Under the new COB rules, the client must be explicitly told the nature of the contracts between the Takaful fund and the operator. They literally have to see the math. How are the operator's fees calculated? How are surpluses shared back to the participants if the pool has a really good year?
But the rule that makes this regulatory shift so vital is the disclosure regarding catastrophic risk.
Yes, the firm must disclose any circumstances where additional contributions to the fund might be required.
Think about how alien that concept is to a conventional consumer. Imagine signing up for car insurance, driving perfectly safely all year, but receiving a bill at the end of the term because too many other people in your pool crashed their cars and the fund ran dry.
It would be a shock.
Right. Because Takaful is a mutual donation pool, participants might actually be called upon to top it up to cover excess claims. A retail client desperately needs to understand that fundamental difference before they sign the contract.
And that's exactly why, by migrating these requirements to the General Conduct of Business module, the DFSA mandates that all Takaful sales require this strict risk disclosure, regardless of whether the firm selling the policy officially holds itself out as conducting Islamic business.
So even if our hypothetical supermarket broker facilitates a Takaful policy on the side without carrying a Shari'a compliant label, they are legally bound by the COB to explain the fee structures and the risk additional contributions to the buyer.
Exactly. The protective mechanism travels with the actual mechanics of the product, not just the marketing label of the firm. It basically creates a watertight environment where complex risk shifting cannot hide behind a lack of specific endorsements.
It's so thorough. So what does this all mean for you? Well, whether you are analyzing emerging markets, managing a conventional portfolio, or exploring decentralized finance, watching the DFSA adapt its rulebook reveals a clear trajectory. Transparency and consumer protection, like forcing clear disclosures on communal risk, are becoming universal requirements.
Absolutely.
The DFSA is proving that a robust regulatory system can accommodate profound structural complexity and culturally specific products, as long as the foundation forces the firm to be honest about how the underlying mechanics actually work.
The architectural blueprints are definitely sound for today's market. However, observing the intersection of Islamic finance and Web3 leaves us with, honestly, a pretty provocative puzzle to ponder regarding the future.
Oh.
Well, the DFSA relies heavily on a systems approach, right? Auditing human Shari'a supervisory boards and physical compliance frameworks. But cryptocurrency inherently drives toward total decentralization and automated smart contracts.
That's true. It's built to remove the human element.
Exactly. So, as financial instruments evolve, how will future regulators globally manage to audit religious compliance when the Shari'a Supervisory Board's rulings are not written in a corporate policy manual but are hard-coded into an immutable, borderless blockchain? I mean, when the system itself is the code, who audits the faith of the machine?
Wow. That is a phenomenal thought to end on. The collision of immutable digital ledgers and interpretive human theology. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. It is a highly complex market out there, but as we have seen, it all relies on the systems running beneath the surface.
It really does.
Keep exploring the mechanics of the instruments you interact with, keep looking behind the curtain, and keep questioning the systems around you. Because just like that Cloudflare block page, once you understand the rules of access, the whole network opens up.